Today we have a gripping story about how one girl ruined her best friend's birthday and how she had to deal with the consequences of her actions. But before we begin, tell us where you are watching us from. It would be interesting to know from what corners of the world you are joining us. Liza and Jamila have been best friends since childhood. This year, Jamila was preparing to celebrate her 21st birthday, and she wanted to spend the day with close friends she could rely on. Liza, as always, was invited to the celebration, but she felt a little uneasy. She didn't know how to properly spend time at a party organized according to Jamila's family traditions. And so the day of the holiday came. Lisa decided that she should be as helpful as possible and do everything to make Jamila happy. But, unfortunately, her intentions led to unexpected consequences, which would later force her to reconsider her behavior and relationship with her friend. Let's continue further, but don't forget to write your comments and share your opinions. This helps us make the streams even more interesting. Jamila's birthday began with anticipation and joy. She and her family had been preparing for the event for weeks. Decorations, food, music, everything had to be perfect. Lisa, despite her ignorance of celebration matters, was eager to do her part. She offered to prepare a special surprise for Jamila, an evening dress that she thought would fit perfectly with the atmosphere of the holiday. When Lisa finally arrived at the party, she noticed that everyone around her was busy with their own affairs. Jamila's parents were busy organizing the party, and Jamila herself was surrounded by friends who congratulated her and gave her gifts. Lisa felt that her presence was a little overshadowed. In an attempt to stand out, she decided to unwrap her surprise right during the main celebration. The problem was that Lisa's dress was completely inappropriate. While Jamila and her friends were wearing traditional African attire, hers was bright and flashy, which unfortunately ruined the spirit of the party. Lisa, oblivious to the taunts and displeased looks, began to dance and attract attention, believing that her efforts deserved recognition. When Jamila saw Lisa's dress and her attempts to attract attention, she felt that her entire celebration was ruined. Tears lit up her eyes. After all, this day was very important to her, and she could not understand why her friend did not respect her culture and traditions. The atmosphere at the party quickly changed. Instead of fun and joy, there was discontent and awkwardness in the air. After the party ended, Jamila locked herself in her room. Lisa, noticing that her friend was clearly upset, tried to find a way to fix the situation. She approached Jamila and apologized, but words could not bring back the festive atmosphere that had existed before. Jamila finally opened up, telling how her culture and traditions were important to her, and how Lisa had violated her personal boundaries with her behavior. The next day, Lisa came to Jamila with an apology and an attempt to correct her mistake. She decided not only to apologize, but also to learn more about her friend's culture. Lisa began to study the traditions, took part in events related to Jamila's culture, and gradually began to understand why her actions were so offensive. Several months passed, and Lisa and Jamila were able to rebuild their relationship. Lisa realized the importance of respecting differences and striving for understanding, and although it took them a long time to mend their relationship, the situation left a deep mark on their friendship and taught them an important lesson about mutual respect and cultural sensitivity. Eventually, they both came to understand each other better and were able to turn their disagreement into an opportunity to grow and learn. Jamila continued to celebrate her birthdays, but now with Lisa, who made sure that each time the celebration was the way Jamila wanted it to be, with respect for tradition and love for her friend. The festive fun began with hope and anticipation, but by mid-evening it had devolved into chaos and bitterness. Lisa, who had genuinely wanted to please Jamila, felt devastated. She couldn't understand why her efforts had provoked such a negative reaction, and her attempts to improve the situation only made things worse. After Jamila went to her room, Lisa remained in the kitchen, surrounded by the wary gazes of the other guests. Whispers and discussions coming from behind the doors created a tense atmosphere. Lisa heard one of the guests talking about how important traditions were to Jamila, and how difficult it was for them to accept foreign behavior. These were words that cut into Lisa's consciousness like sharp needles. The thought that she had made an irreparable mistake kept spinning in her head, and now her actions could cost her not only friendship, but also respect. Gradually, the night gave way to morning. Lisa, not doubting that Jamila would still be upset, decided that she had to act decisively. She gathered her things and went to Jamila's house with the intention of apologizing and trying to correct her behavior. When Lisa arrived, she found Jamila and her parents sitting at the table, staring at empty plates. Gloom and depression hung in the air. Jamila acted as if she had been broken. She did not answer calls or text messages. Her gaze was empty and emotionless. Lisa, shocked by what she saw, decided not to waste time on empty words. She came with a sincere apology and a willingness to listen. "Jamila," Lisa began, trying to keep her voice calm despite the tremor in her voice. "I came to apologize. I understand that my actions were inappropriate and offensive. I wanted to do something good, but instead I messed everything up. Is there anything I can do to make it right?" Jamila looked at Lisa with bitterness, her eyes full of tears. "How could you not understand that for me this is not just a holiday? This is my culture, my family, my heritage. I feel betrayed and devalued." Lisa felt her heart break. She could see how upset Jamila was, and this realization made her feel even more guilty. "I understand. I was inappropriate and rude. I didn't respect what you hold dear, but I'm willing to learn and change. If you let me." Jamila, although disappointed, saw sincerity in Lisa's eyes. "You understand that this is not just a mistake? This is a violation of my personal boundaries and my traditions. I'm not sure I can forget this so easily." Lisa nodded, knowing that her actions had caused deep pain. "I'm not asking for forgiveness now. I want you to know that I'm willing to work on myself and do whatever it takes to rebuild trust." Several weeks passed, and Lisa continued to make efforts to prove her sincerity. She enrolled in cultural awareness courses, participated in events organized by Jamila, and showed an active desire to understand and respect her friend's culture. She also wrote an open letter describing how her mistakes had affected her perception of the world and her attitude toward cultural differences. Jamila, observing Lisa's changes and efforts, gradually began to open up. She saw that Lisa was genuinely trying to correct her mistakes and respected her culture. They slowly began to rebuild their trust, although it was a long and difficult process. And so, a few months later, Jamila invited Liza to a new celebration she had organized. Liza, realizing the significance of this moment, came, ready to respect all the traditions and customs. This day became a symbol of their restoration, with deep understanding and new boundaries that they had set for themselves. Lisa and Jamila's story was an important lesson in how to make mistakes and still find ways to forgive and understand. Despite the challenges, their friendship emerged from the ordeal stronger and deeper, leaving them both wiser and more knowledgeable about what it means to be true friends. Over time, the relationship between Lisa and Jamila began to heal. Lisa did her best to show respect for Jamila's culture and understand her worldview. The holidays they celebrated together became more harmonious, and the two girls began to find common ground that had previously seemed unattainable. One day, Jamila invited Lisa to her family's traditional event, which was held in honor of an important cultural holiday. Lisa was touched by the invitation and prepared for the event with special attention. She studied the details and tried to ensure that her presence was as respectful and appropriate as possible. At this event, Jamila introduced Lisa to her family and friends. Everyone was pleasantly surprised to see Lisa participating in the celebration with respect and interest. They started talking about cultural differences, and Lisa even tried her hand at cooking traditional dishes, which received many positive comments. However, amidst the festive atmosphere Lisa and Jamila were immersed in, there was one important secret hidden. There were rumors in Jamila's family about a long-hidden family secret document that was allegedly hidden many years ago. This document was connected to their family's past and, according to rumors, could reveal important and shocking details. A week after the holiday, Jamila received a mysterious letter addressed to her and her family. The letter was written on old, yellowed parchment and contained indications that their family's secret document was in one of the old chests that were kept in the attic of their home. Jamila, although confused, decided that this could be an important part of her family history, and together with Lisa, she went to the attic to examine the contents of the chests. When the girls opened one of the chests, they found many ancient documents, including the secret document. Its discovery was unexpected and disturbing. It was a document confirming that the Jamali family was involved in a serious historical conflict, which, according to rumors, could be connected with the loss of wealth and reputation. The document described how Jamila's family had been involved in a complex political conspiracy in the past that had led to their exile and loss of influence. This information shocked Jamila and her family, as they had never heard of it before. Lisa, seeing the confusion on her friend's face, supported her and helped her understand the situation. They decided to turn to historians and researchers to understand the truth of this data and understand how it could affect their lives. Upon further investigation, it was discovered that the document had been forged. Some members of the Jomly family, who were trying to keep their own mistakes and failures a secret, had forged the document to create the appearance of a historical conflict. The true story turned out to be less dramatic than expected. This unexpected turn of events gave Lisa and Jamila a new perspective on their relationship. They realized that the real problems and conflict were internal and personal, not related to history. Their friendship, which had already survived many trials, was able to withstand even such an unpredictable situation. Jamila, although disappointed that her family hid the truth, was grateful for Liza's support and help. Liza, in turn, realized how important it is to be there for friends during difficult times and help them overcome difficulties. The story of how Liza and Jamila found their paths to understanding and respect took on a new, deeper meaning. Now their relationship was not only restored, but strengthened through joint efforts and the revelation of hidden secrets. So, in the end, they found not only each other, but also a new true depth to their friendship, based on sincerity, trust and understanding. And although the story of their relationship began with difficulties, they were able to turn these trials into experiences that strengthened their bond and gave them new strength to overcome together any obstacles that might appear on the horizon. Several months have passed since Jamila and Lisa uncovered the forged family document. Although the truth had deceived them, they decided to focus on rebuilding trust and strengthening their friendship. Each new interaction was a step forward in normalizing their relationship. One day, as they sat together in a cafe, enjoying a cup of coffee, Jamila received a phone call from her mother. The voice on the other end of the line was tense. "Jamila, we need to talk. There is new information about the family history." Jamila and Lisa, surprised and worried, went to Jamila's house. When they arrived, Jamila noticed that her mother seemed even more agitated than usual. "We found new documents," her mother said, "the real ones. They shed light on what happened to our family, and it's much more serious than we could have ever thought." The document that Jamila's mother provided mentioned unusual financial transactions, unconfirmed deals, and unknown individuals related to events that took place in the early 20th century. It was related to the same historical events that were mentioned in the forged document, but now there was real evidence. Jamila and Lisa, determined to get to the bottom of what was happening, began a joint investigation. They found archival materials that pointed to complex financial machinations and political intrigues involving Jamila's ancestors. It turned out that their family was part of a complex network of corruption and manipulation that led to their exile. During their research, Jamila and Lisa encountered an unexpected obstacle. They began receiving threats, possibly from people interested in keeping the data from coming to light. Anonymous calls and messages began appearing, threatening the safety of Jamila and her family. With the growing threats, the relationship between Lisa and Jamila began to be tested again. Jamila began to become more and more absorbed in her thoughts and experiences, which led to frequent quarrels between the friends. Lisa, on the one hand, understood that Jamila was going through a difficult time, but on the other hand, her own feelings of fear and anxiety began to put pressure on their friendship. One evening, after a particularly tense conversation, Jamila told Lisa that she needed time to sort out her feelings. She suggested that Lisa leave for a while so that they could both rethink the situation. Lisa was devastated, but she knew that this might be the only way to restore balance to their relationship. While Jamila and Lisa were apart, Jamila continued her research and discovered that her family was not the only victim of these scams. Other families in their community had suffered from the same corrupt practices, and many of them were also seeking the truth. This discovery gave Jamila a new perspective. She realized that her struggle was part of a much larger historical context. One day, when Jamila decided to seek help from other affected families, she came across a person who might have important information about the lurking threats. This person turned out to be a former journalist who specialized in investigating corruption cases and knew about the dark secrets associated with her family. Jamila contacted him and they began a joint investigation that yielded new key leads. They discovered that the threat posed by unknown individuals was due to someone in power today wanting to keep their secret interests safe. Together with a journalist, Jamila and Lisa gathered evidence that could expose these schemes and ensure the safety of their family. After the truth was revealed and the threats were eliminated, Jamila and Lisa met again. Their meeting was full of emotions. Fear and anxiety gave way to relief and hope. They talked about their feelings and experiences, realizing that the trials they had gone through had only strengthened their bond. Lisa, seeing how much Jamila had changed and how she had learned to cope with difficulties, realized how important this friendship was for both of them. They decided to continue their joint investigation to help other families who had suffered from similar scams and to use their knowledge and experience to make changes. Ultimately, Jamila and Lisa's story became a symbol of the fight for truth and justice, and their friendship, forged through difficult trials, became an example of strength and resilience. Together, they were able to turn difficult moments into opportunities for growth and change, not only in their own lives, but in the lives of others. After uncovering the truth about family secrets and overcoming threats, Jamila and Lisa began to rebuild their lives and figure out how to use their knowledge to help others. They launched a project to inform and support other families affected by financial fraud, and their work quickly gained popularity in public circles. But dark clouds began to gather over their world. A few weeks after they went public with their investigation, a wave of reprisals and attacks began. Unknown individuals began to threaten their loved ones, and rumors began to circulate that Jamila and Lisa were allegedly trying to undermine public order. Even within their own circle, paranoia set in, trust in them waned, and some former allies began to distance themselves. One night, Jamila received a call from her mother. The words she heard were like a bolt from the blue. "Jamila, our house, it burned down. All the important documents and family heirlooms were lost in the fire. The police are calling it arson." Shocked and in despair, Jamila immediately went to the scene. Lisa, having learned of the tragedy, also hurried to her friend's house. When they arrived, the fire had already been extinguished, but the sight of the destroyed house and the remains of charred documents left Jamila and Lisa in a state of numbness. They learned that no one had been hurt, but the loss of family heirlooms and documents had caused irreparable damage. For Jamila, it was more than just material loss, it was a blow to her heritage and the culture she had been trying to preserve and restore. Even as Jamila and Lisa continued their work supporting other families, the tragedy of the house had a devastating impact on their mental and emotional well-being. Jamila began to experience deep depression and guilt for failing to protect her family and legacy. Lisa tried to support Jamila, but her own worries and constant threats from those who wanted their work to stop began to affect their friendship. Lisa also felt under pressure and tension, which led to frequent quarrels between the friends. One day, during a particularly intense conflict, Jamila couldn't take it anymore. She told Lisa that she was missed, that she felt lonely and betrayed. "I understand that you're trying to help, but I feel like we're drifting further and further apart. Our efforts have led us to this, to the destruction of everything we've built." Lisa, feeling that her own attempts to fix the situation were becoming futile, decided to take a break. She agreed that Jamila needed time and space to deal with the pain and loss. Lisa temporarily stepped away from the project to give Jamila a chance to find her place and recuperate. After Lisa left, Jamila became even more isolated. Her condition continued to worsen, and she almost never left the house. Lisa, although distant, could not completely ignore her friend's suffering. She continued to monitor what was happening and often thought about how she could help. After a few months, when Jamila began to recover a little, she decided to seek professional help and psychotherapy. This decision turned out to be critical to her recovery. With the help of a therapist, Jamila gradually began to return to normal life and again turned her attention to her projects and goals. Lisa, seeing that Jamila was beginning to cope with difficulties, decided to return and offer her help. The reunion of the friends was full of emotions, and they both realized that despite all the difficulties and tragedies, their friendship was more important than ever. Over time, Jamila and Lisa reunited and continued their work. They adapted their approaches and increased their attention to the psycho-emotional state of those they helped. They focused on restoring trust and supporting victims, adding elements of self-help and psychological support to their projects. The tragedy they experienced left a deep mark, but it also gave them the opportunity to see how strong their bond can be and how important it is to support each other in the most difficult times. Their story became a lesson in how to overcome deep trials and find hope even in the darkest situations. Although the effects of the tragedy will always be with them, Jamila and Lisa have learned to appreciate every moment and the work they do for others. And although their path has been full of difficulties, they have found the strength to continue and strive for a better future. Jamila and Lisa, as they began to rebuild their lives after the events surrounding the revelation of family secrets and threats, found themselves under renewed pressure. Their fight for the truth and to help other families who had suffered attracted attention, but also danger. It gradually became clear that their efforts were not only attracting support, but also aggression from those who had a vested interest in keeping their dark secrets. When Jamila learned of the fire in her home, it was like a bolt from the blue. All the family heirlooms and documents she had spent so long collecting were destroyed. She and Lisa arrived at the scene in complete shock. The charred remains and smoke were a reminder of what had happened. Jamila could hardly hold back her tears as she looked at the remains of her past. After this tragic event, Jamila sank into depression. Every day seemed endlessly dark and dreary to her. Feeling as if she had lost everything that was dear to her, she found it difficult to cope with ordinary responsibilities. Lisa, despite her efforts, could not completely fill the void left by the tragedy. Their friendship began to crumble as Jamila began to withdraw and become more and more withdrawn. The arguments between them became frequent. Lisa tried to support Jamila, but her own fears and insecurities grew. Instead of finding comfort in friendship, they increasingly fought with each other, which only increased their stress and anxiety. Lisa began to feel that her attempts to help were in vain and that her own emotional state was becoming increasingly strained. Jamila made the decision to take a break. She told Lisa that she needed time to process her grief and heal. Lisa, although saddened by the decision, understood that it might be necessary. She left to give Jamila space to heal and for Jamila to find inner peace. While Jamila was alone, her condition only worsened. She began to suffer from anxiety attacks and a feeling of complete hopelessness. She soon realized that she needed professional help and sought therapy. This decision became a turning point in her life. With the help of a therapist, Jamila began to slowly recover, working through her fears and experiences. Lisa, watching Jamila cope with difficulties, decided to return and offer her help. When they met again, both girls were full of emotions. They discussed their feelings and experiences, which allowed them to reconnect. Lisa saw that Jamila began to recover again and realized that her help was needed. Jamila gradually returned to work on the project. She again focused on supporting other families who had suffered from financial fraud. Together with Lisa, they adapted their approaches, paying special attention to the psycho-emotional state of those who sought help. This included holding group sessions and individual consultations, as well as developing support programs for victims. Although they continued to face challenges and opposition, Jamila and Lisa learned to appreciate every moment and the work they did. The tragedy and trials they went through left a deep mark on their lives, but they found the strength to continue and strive for a better future. Jamila and Lisa's story is a testament to the power of friendship and perseverance, and a lesson in how to find hope and resilience in life's darkest moments. The tragedy and hardships they faced only made their bond stronger and taught them to value the present moment and each other's support. Despite all the difficulties, Jamila and Lisa got back on their feet and continued their work. Their project to support families who suffered from financial fraud began to bear fruit. Gradually, thanks to their efforts, they were able to establish contacts with other organizations and expand their programs. Their work became an inspiration to many who experienced similar difficulties. However, just when Jamila and Lisa were beginning to believe in a bright future, they were faced with a new, unexpected challenge. One day, a man showed up at their office who introduced himself as a private detective named Robert. He claimed to have information that could radically change their understanding of what had happened. Robert said his client, a wealthy businessman named Alexander Brown, was interested in uncovering the true extent of the financial fraud surrounding Jamila's family. Brown claimed he had evidence that suggested Jamila and Lisa may have been targeted not only by local criminals, but by more powerful and dangerous groups operating overseas. Jamila and Lisa, puzzled by this statement, decided to meet with Brown. During the meeting, Brown showed them documents and videos showing that their investigation had touched on the interests of powerful international players who were involved in corruption schemes on a global level. It turned out that their work had attracted the attention of some of the most powerful and secretive businessmen in the world. Brown offered Jamila and Lisa help in exchange for their cooperation in uncovering these schemes. He advised that his own resources and contacts could help them gain access to additional information, but they should be prepared for the possibility that their lives might be at risk. Without thinking twice, Jamila and Lisa agreed to cooperate. They realized that they had encountered a global network of corruption and manipulation, and their investigation could be decisive in the fight against this evil. Working with Brown opened up new horizons for them. They learned that behind all the machinations were not just local criminals, but also high-profile figures with connections to governments and major corporations around the world. International connections began to emerge in their investigation, which made them wonder about the scale of what was happening. However, as they delved deeper into the investigation, something unexpected happened. Brown disappeared. A note was found in his office stating that he was forced into hiding due to threats from those who did not want their secrets to be revealed. He left Jamila and Lisa with instructions on how to continue their work, but his disappearance added a new level of danger and uncertainty to their investigation. Without Brown and his resources, Jamila and Lisa were forced to take risks on their own. They continued to gather data and solve the puzzle. Although the dangers increased with each step, threats began to arrive not only in the form of anonymous messages, but also through physical attacks and espionage attempts. One day, while they were doing their research, their home was broken into and important documents and data were stolen. This was a clear sign that their work had been noticed by those who wanted to stop their investigation. Realizing that they had to tread carefully, Jamila and Lisa decided to move their research to a safer place and continue the fight to uncover the truth. Every step of the way to uncovering global corruption schemes was fraught with danger and surprise. Jamila and Lisa began to realize that their investigation had touched on deep and complex networks, and they found themselves at the center of an international conflict that could change the lives of many. In this labyrinth of lies and manipulation, Jamila and Lisa continued to fight for justice, facing invisible enemies and risking their lives to uncover the truth. Their efforts and determination, despite all the dangers and betrayals, became a light of hope for many who also sought justice in this complex and dark world. Their story, full of tragedies and unexpected turns, became a symbol not only of personal struggle, but also of the global quest for truth and justice. And although the path was thorny and full of obstacles, Jamila and Lisa remained devoted to their ideals and were not going to stop until they succeeded in their quest to expose international machinations and restore lost justice and trust. After Brown's disappearance and the theft of important documents, Jamila and Lisa found themselves in a difficult and dangerous situation. They had to continue their investigation, but they knew that their actions could now be closely monitored. Every decision, every step required the utmost caution. One day, while they were working on restoring the lost data and analyzing the remaining documents, they received disturbing news. One of their informants, who had been helping them with their research, was found dead under mysterious circumstances. This was a huge blow to both of them. The tragedy reminded them of the real danger they were facing, and their own safety was at risk. After this event, Jamila and Lisa decided to hide. They moved to a small, inconspicuous town, hoping that they would not be found there. But even in hiding, they were not safe. The constant feeling of anxiety and fear of the unknown gradually wore them down. Jamila became more and more withdrawn. Her fears and depression increased. Lisa, in turn, tried to support her, but she herself also experienced deep emotional stress. One day, when Jamila and Lisa were beginning to feel that their life in this new place was finally becoming more stable, another unexpected event occurred. A woman knocked on the door of their new home, introducing herself as an old friend of Jamila's family. She brought with her a bag of documents that had been hidden from them after the fire. The woman said that her father was involved in the case and that the documents could contain information that would help them in their investigation. She also said that her father had long tried to protect the truth, but his efforts were destroyed by the same forces that are now persecuting Jamila and Lisa. When Jamila and Lisa began to examine the new documents, they discovered that they contained evidence not only of Jamila's family's ties to corruption, but also that their own investigation had attracted the attention of powerful international groups. This discovery revealed that they were embroiled in a conflict far more complex and dangerous than they had ever imagined. The documents also contained information about a planned takeover of several countries and the use of corruption schemes to manipulate global economies. This was much more than they had expected, and it required them not only to fight for their own security, but also to try to prevent global catastrophes. Unfortunately, Jamila and Lisa's happiness was short-lived. Soon after receiving the documents, their new hiding place was discovered. At first, there were just signs of surveillance, strange cars that periodically appeared on the street. and strange people who seemed familiar to them, but soon the threats became more real. Their apartment was broken into, and they discovered that someone was looking for the remaining documents and information. Desperate to avoid further threats, Jamila and Lisa decided to seek help from international human rights organizations that could provide them with protection and support in the fight against global threats. However, their attempts were unsuccessful. The organizations they turned out to be controlled by the same forces that persecuted them. This discovery only deepened their sense of hopelessness. On one of their darkest days, Jamila and Lisa received a message from an unknown source. It was a video that showed their families in danger. The video threatened that if they did not stop their investigation, their loved ones would be put in serious danger. Realizing that their actions could cost the lives of their loved ones, Jamila and Lisa were forced to make a tragic decision. They decided to stop their investigation and try to find a new way to protect their families and themselves. It was a painful decision, but they knew that they could not put the lives of their loved ones in danger. However, even after making this decision, Jamila and Lisa continued to feel trapped. Their work, which began as a fight for justice, turned into a personal tragedy. They lost not only hope for justice, but also a sense of control over their own destiny. In the end, despite all their efforts and sacrifices, Jamila and Lisa found themselves in a difficult situation where their goals and ideals collided with the harsh realities of the world. They were forced to start a new life, hiding from those who wanted to destroy them, and trying to rebuild themselves after all the tragedies they had experienced. Their story became a testament to struggle and sacrifice, but also a lesson in how difficult and dangerous situations can change people's lives, even if they strive for justice and truth. Jamila and Lisa, hiding in their new hideout, increasingly felt their lives turning into a chain of disturbing and dangerous events. Although they tried to lead normal lives, the constant fear of pursuers and the threat to their loved ones forced them to be in a state of constant readiness. Soon, Jamila began receiving strange messages. These weren't just threats, but cryptic messages that mentioned details from their previous investigation. These messages were written on antique paper and hinted that people with deep knowledge of their work were behind the threats. Each message added a new layer to the mystery. One of them mentioned coordinates that pointed to a place where they could find important information. Jamila and Lisa, despite their fears, decided to check these coordinates. They felt that this could be the key to solving their problems. Upon arrival at the designated location, they found an old, abandoned warehouse. Inside, it was full of dusty boxes and trash, but they found a box containing old archives and documents. These materials were related to international deals, corruption schemes, and names of people they had never seen before. One of the documents they found was a detailed map with locations linked to covert operations. The map showed important nodes that they found could be the focus of their next investigation. Jamila and Lisa, although devastated, couldn't help but notice that their investigation seemed to be touching on something much larger. Soon after, they noticed that they were being followed. The surveillance became more and more persistent. They tried to find out who exactly was behind it and discovered that they were professional spies working for international groups who were trying to cover their tracks. Despite the danger, Jamila and Lisa decided to use the information they had found. They learned that one of the key nodes on the map was connected to a major international conference on economic issues that was scheduled to take place in the coming weeks. This conference could be a place where they could gain access to additional information and perhaps expose those behind the global machinations. Preparing for the conference was their next step. They pretended to be journalists to get accreditation for the event. For several days, they processed information, met with key figures and tried to gain access to closed events. At the conference, they managed to eavesdrop on conversations and gather additional evidence about the connections between the world's elites and corruption schemes. However, their activities attracted the attention of security and agents. During one closed session, they barely managed to leave when they were spotted. Returning to the hideout was dangerous. They found that their temporary accommodation had been ransacked and all documents stolen again. In a panic, they decided not to stay in one place for too long and to use their last resources to expose the conspiracy. However, an unexpected turn soon occurred. The next day, a new person came to their house. It was a young lawyer named Alexei, who introduced himself as a man working for them. He said that he worked with their missing partner Brown and that his job was to protect them and ensure their safety. Alexei said that Brown had left him instructions before he disappeared that would help them in their fight. He also explained that the theft of the documents was part of a more complex plan to sabotage and destroy evidence. He offered to help Jamila and Lisa protect them and provide additional resources to continue the investigation. Gradually, with Alexei's help, Jamil and Lisa began a new phase of the investigation. They discovered that Brown was actually part of a secret organization that worked to expose global corruption schemes. They began collaborating with other members of this organization, who provided them with access to back channels of information and additional protection. Meanwhile, their own investigation has reached a new level. They have learned that the international players behind the machinations are preparing a major political and economic upheaval that could change the global balance of power. Jamila and Lisa, realizing the scale of the threat, have decided to do everything possible to prevent this crisis. In the final stages of their fight, they were able to gather enough evidence to build a powerful case against those behind the corruption. They were able to use their new connections and resources to go to international courts and expose a conspiracy of global manipulation and political intrigue. Their work led to significant changes. Corruption schemes were exposed and many high-profile figures were brought to justice. Jamila and Lisa, despite all the dangers and losses, achieved their goal. They were able to restore justice and create the conditions for a better future. In the end, though their lives would never be the same, Jamila and Lisa found solace in the fact that their struggle had led to important changes. Their story became a lesson in resilience and courage in facing the most difficult challenges, and they continued their work, now as a symbol of hope and change. Jamila and Lisa, having found refuge in a new location, continued their efforts despite constant threats and surveillance. Adjusting to a new reality, they decided to do everything possible to complete their investigation and ensure the safety of their loved ones. Their new partner, Alexei, who, as it turned out, was not just a lawyer, but a key member of an international anti-corruption network, helped them not only with data collection, but also with protection. Jamila and Lisa soon learned that the international conference where they had previously planned to gain access to information was just the tip of the iceberg. Alexei revealed to them that behind the conference were secret negotiations related to major financial manipulations that affected several countries. They began to suspect that large international corporations and politicians were involved in schemes that could destabilize the world economy. As Jamila and Lisa worked on new documents and investigations, they came across the names of powerful people and hidden organizations that were revealed to be connected to a series of strange and dangerous events. These organizations used their resources to cover their tracks and intimidate those who tried to uncover the truth. Jamila and Lisa began to realize that their investigation had crossed borders and that they were facing a global crime network that even included elements of state power. One day, they received an unexpected call from a man who introduced himself as a former employee of one of these organizations. He claimed to have information about a planned plot against major global economies that was to take place in the coming weeks. He offered to meet to hand over important documents and reveal details of the plan. The meeting was arranged in a secluded location, away from prying eyes. The man, who introduced himself as Mikhail, said that he worked for an organization that specialized in manipulation and manipulative schemes. He was shocked by how his former colleagues used power and money to achieve their goals. Mikhail gave Jamila and Lisa new evidence that confirmed their suspicions about a global conspiracy. The documents handed over by Mikhail contained plans to manipulate financial markets that would cause economic crises in several countries. They also implicated high-profile individuals and large corporations that would control these manipulations. Mikhail said that his former colleagues planned to use special software to create false economic crises and profit from panic in the markets. Jamila and Lisa decided to act immediately. They began to carefully analyze the documents and look for ways to disclose the information on the international stage. Alexei organized a meeting with several trusted journalists and activists who could help disseminate the information. However, they soon encountered new difficulties. One day, as Jamila and Lisa were preparing for a press conference to reveal their findings, their new allies were attacked. It was a targeted act of violence that left some of their supporters seriously injured and even dead. Jamila and Lisa realized that their opponents had become even more aggressive, and that they were on the brink of a new, more dangerous phase in their struggle. Despite these new threats, Jamila and Lisa could not stop. They decided to move to an even safer location and use their resources to find additional allies. they began working with international human rights organizations, which were able to provide them not only with protection, but also with additional resources to disclose information. They soon learned that their opponents were preparing a major international summit, which was to be the place where their plan to manipulate economies was to be implemented. Jamila and Lisa, realizing that this was their last chance to stop the conspiracy, decided to infiltrate the summit as delegates and gather the necessary evidence. On the day of the summit, they infiltrated the meeting room in carefully chosen costumes and disguises. They used their skills and training to gain access to closed events and secret negotiations. In the process, they were able to record important conversations and collect key documents. But when they tried to leave the place, they were discovered. A tense chase began, and they had to hide in a labyrinth of buildings and underground tunnels. At some point, when their pursuers seemed very close, Jamila and Lisa found a way out and managed to return to a safe place. The documents and records they managed to collect became the basis for a new round of revelations. They passed this information on to journalists and human rights organizations, which were able to organize a large-scale investigation and attract the attention of international authorities. The tragedy they faced and the constant threats they had to fight made their story legendary. Jamila and Lisa, who survived so much and kept faith in their mission, made a significant difference. They became symbols of resilience and determination, and their work led to real change on a global scale. Although their lives would never be the same, they found solace and satisfaction in the fact that their efforts were not in vain. Their investigation helped expose global criminal schemes and prevent a catastrophe that could have affected millions of lives. Jamila and Lisa, despite all the trials, continued their work, knowing that their fight was important and meaningful. After the thrilling incident at the summit, Jamila and Lisa felt like they were on the brink of something big. Despite their physical and emotional distress, they knew they had a chance to uncover a massive conspiracy that threatened the world's economic and political systems. They decided to use their last resources to complete the investigation and ensure global exposure. The evidence collected, including videos and documents, was shared with international journalistic platforms, and soon the world learned of the massive corruption that affected not only individual countries but also international corporations. The documents revealed complex schemes of financial market manipulation, secret deals, and international connections that facilitated subversive activities. When the information was released, it created an international scandal. Global news outlets picked up the story, and soon a host of high-profile individuals, politicians, and corporate executives were under investigation. The evidence that Jamila and Lisa had presented began to lead to trials, and authorities around the world began arresting key figures connected to the conspiracy. However, success did not come without its consequences. Jamila and Lisa became the target of numerous threats. At first, these were anonymous calls and threatening letters, but soon the situation became much more serious. One day, they discovered that their new hideout had been broken into and their personal belongings had been sorted out. This warned them that their opponents could be much more dangerous than they had assumed. With the threats escalating, Jamila and Lisa decided to temporarily hide in another, safer location. They contacted several international human rights organizations, which provided them not only with protection, but also with access to additional resources and contacts. Among these organizations was a secret network of activists specializing in protecting whistleblowers. In their newfound secrecy, they continued to monitor developments. They collaborated with lawyers and investigators, helping them analyze their findings and maintain international attention to the case. Their work became key in trials that led to significant political and economic changes. Meanwhile, Jamila and Lisa received new information from trusted sources. It turned out that part of their investigation touched on even deeper layers of corruption and crime. One source reported that behind the major financial fraud were not only international corporations, but also secret political groups seeking global control. With this information, they began a new phase of their investigation. They used their connections and resources to sort out new clues and connections. This led them to even more complex and dangerous revelations that threatened to destroy not only the economic structures but also the political systems of many countries. During their investigation, Jamila and Lisa were faced with another shocking discovery. One of their old allies, who had helped them at the beginning of their fight, turned out to be a double agent working for one of the groups they were trying to expose. This betrayal was a heavy blow for them, and they realized that they had to be even more careful and trust only trusted sources. Having finally sorted out the new evidence, Jamila and Lisa organized a large-scale press conference where they revealed all the information about international manipulation and corruption schemes. This event became a turning point, causing a wave of protests and demands for reform in various countries. The global community began to react to the revelations. A number of measures were taken to prevent similar schemes in the future. Observers recorded the beginning of reforms and changes in politics and the economy aimed at increasing transparency and combating corruption. Still, Jamila and Lisa knew their work wasn't done. They continued to monitor the aftermath of their whistleblowers and provide protection for other whistleblowers. Their own lives became more secure, but the threat never went away entirely. As a result of their efforts, many changes were achieved. The political and financial systems became more transparent, and many corrupt figures were brought to justice. Jamila and Lisa, despite all the trials and sacrifices, were able to achieve significant results. Their story became a symbol of the fight for truth and justice. They proved that even in the darkest corners of the world, you can find light and change things for the better. Although their lives were changed forever, they found solace in the fact that their efforts brought real change and a better future for many people. After a major revelation and international scandal, Jamila and Lisa found their lives completely changed. They became symbols of the fight for truth, but this new role brought with it many difficulties. Their efforts did not go unnoticed, and their enemies did not forget about them. The threat they attracted became even more obvious and dangerous. One night, when Jamila and Lisa finally found a moment of peace and thought about their new life, their hideout was attacked. The security they had hired was no match for the well-organized and armed attackers. As a result of the attack, their temporary shelter was destroyed and the important documents they had been collecting for a long time were lost or destroyed. It was a blow that could have seriously undermined their investigation and hopes for further revelations. In a panic, they fled, but a series of tragic events began to unfold in their lives. First, they learned that one of their close friends, who had helped them uncover information, had been found dead under mysterious circumstances. It was shocking news that dealt another blow to their emotional state. The loss of their friend became a constant reminder of how dangerous their business was and the cost of their goals. Jamila and Lisa tried to return to their work, but every new move and decision seemed to escalate the situation. They continued to be targeted by those who wanted to destroy them, and were forced to live in constant fear. Even their new allies began to be threatened and attacked, which only deepened their sense of hopelessness. One day, as a result of a leak of information about their whereabouts, they received terrible news. Their families were under attack. Their family members who were not involved in the investigation became targets for those who wanted to intimidate Jamila and Lisa. Several close relatives were kidnapped and held in an unknown location, and one of them, unfortunately, died as a result of the attack. This tragic event deeply affected Jamila and Lisa. They felt torn between the need to continue their work and to protect their remaining loved ones. The dramatic situation reached its peak when they received a video showing the suffering of their relatives. This was the last straw that led them to extreme measures. Jamila and Lisa decided to temporarily stop their investigation and focus on saving their families. They turned to international intelligence agencies for help, who promised to provide protection and resources to find and free their loved ones. It was a decision they had to make with pain and a heavy heart, but they understood that their own safety and success were not worth the lives of their loved ones. The incredible effort to find and free the relatives led to several critical moments. Secret Service agents and private detectives worked around the clock to find the whereabouts of the abductees. Jamila and Lisa participated in every stage of the operation, despite their own fears and emotional exhaustion. During the rescue operation, despite all efforts, one of their relatives was found dead. It was a tragic blow that finally broke Jamila and Lisa. They continued to fight to save the others, but each loss left a deep mark on them. Eventually, they managed to free the remaining abductees and return them to safety. Despite the joy of being reunited with loved ones, the loss and suffering left an indelible mark on their lives. They understood that their fight for the truth had brought not only important changes, but also tragic sacrifices. Jamila and Lisa continued their work, but with a new sense of anxiety and pain. Their efforts had led to global reforms and the exposure of a vast conspiracy, but the price they had to pay was high. They found solace in the fact that their sacrifices and labors had not been in vain, and that their actions had led to real change. Their stories became a testament not only to the fight for truth, but also to how difficult and tragic it can be to seek justice in a world full of danger and betrayal. After Jamila and Lisa freed their remaining relatives, their lives did not return to normal. The tragedies they had experienced left deep emotional and psychological scars. In addition, their safety became even more vulnerable. They realized that their enemies would not leave them alone and would continue to try to destroy them. Jamila and Lisa decided to move to another location, hidden and well guarded, to avoid further attacks. They continued to work on exposing the remaining elements of the conspiracy, but each day was filled with constant fear and anxiety. Their physical and mental health began to deteriorate noticeably. Things took an unexpected turn when Lisa began receiving strange messages. At first, they were threatening anonymous letters that hinted that their actions had affected people who might resort to violent measures. Then came a letter with photographs of their remaining loved ones and colleagues working on the same project. The photographs contained noticeable threats and demands to stop the investigation, or else the consequences would be even more catastrophic. Jamila and Lisa turned to their remaining allies to bolster their defense, but it was ineffective. They felt like they were on the brink of an abyss, and that every move they made could lead to further losses. One day, as they were returning from yet another meeting with an informant, their car was blown up by an explosion. Fortunately, they survived, but their condition became critical. Jamila was seriously injured, and Lisa was in shock. In the wake of these tragic events, Jamila ended up in the hospital, where her condition was stable but required a long recovery. Lisa, despite her own injuries, decided to take responsibility for completing the investigation. She felt that she had to finish the job, despite all the fears and threats. During her investigation, Lisa discovered that the conspiracy they were trying to expose was only part of a larger scheme. It turned out that it was not just individuals and corporations that were behind it, but also high-profile government figures who had their own plans for manipulation and global change. These figures used their resources and influence to neutralize those who could expose their plans. One day, Lisa discovered that the information she had gathered had leaked into the hands of those who were pursuing her. She learned that her actions had attracted the attention of the largest international crime syndicates, who were willing to do anything to protect their interests. Lisa found herself in a situation where she could become a victim of her own fight for the truth. Unfortunately, the tragedy did not stop there. Lisa and Jamila, although they continued to fight, were faced with another terrible news. Their rescued relatives were again targeted, and some of them were kidnapped and killed again. This was the final blow that finally broke their morale. Meanwhile, Lisa decided to hand over all the data she had collected to human rights organizations and international authorities. She knew that her own life could be in danger, but she also knew that the information had to be disclosed. Just as she was preparing for the final step to present evidence on the international stage, she was discovered. In the final scene of their fight, Lisa was trapped, trying to escape. She was caught and killed. Her death was a vivid and tragic end to their fight. Jamila, still recovering in the hospital, learned of Lisa's death and was devastated by the loss of her friend and ally. It was the final defeat that devastated her. Despite their tragic losses, Jamila and Lisa left a significant legacy. The information they collected was exposed and brought to the attention of world leaders. The global investigation led to important reforms and the exposure of corrupt systems, preventing further disasters. Jamila, who had endured so much suffering and loss, continued her work despite her deep personal pain. She became a symbol of strength and resilience, and her fight left a deep mark on history. The story of Jamila and Lisa became a testament not only to the fight for truth, but also to the high price that can be paid for pursuing justice. After the tragic events that rocked Jamila and Lisa's lives, Jamila continued to struggle with the aftermath of her injuries while in hospital. She was devastated by the loss of Lisa and the suffering of her loved ones. However, despite her difficult emotional state, Jamila was determined to see the case through to the end. Lisa had left Jamila not only moral support, but also an unfinished business, and Jamila felt it was her responsibility to complete their investigation. Once Jamila was well enough to get back on her feet, she continued to work on the remaining elements of the investigation. She discovered that the information they had gathered was so vast and complex that many aspects had not yet been fully exposed. Jamila decided to team up with other international organizations and human rights groups to continue the work together. One day, while analyzing the remaining data, Jamila stumbled upon an unexpected discovery. In one of the files, she found a document that not only provided new evidence, but also contained details of secret negotiations between governments and corporations that could lead to a new round of revelations. This document indicated the presence of powerful allies who could help in the fight for the truth. Jamila contacted these allies, and they began a joint investigation. These new partners turned out to be highly skilled detectives and lawyers with access to resources that allowed them to conduct complex investigations and process huge amounts of data. Soon, they were able to collect even more evidence and identify the key figures behind the international manipulation. At this time, international media began to cover their investigation again, attracting the attention of the public and the authorities. The new revelations became the basis for a new wave of political and legal action. In some countries, large-scale reforms began to combat corruption and restore trust in governments. Things took an unexpected turn when Jamila received an offer from an international organization to be part of a new commission appointed to oversee the implementation of reforms and ensure transparency in government and corporate structures. The offer was not only recognition of her work, but also a chance to use her knowledge and experience to further improve. In addition, a vast international effort has identified many other whistleblowers and activists who have begun to work together to strengthen the justice system and prevent similar conspiracies from happening again. This unification has strengthened the fight against corruption and has become a powerful symbol of global solidarity and truth. After some time, Jamila found balance in her life again. She was able to reunite with her remaining family members and begin to rebuild her life after all the trials she had endured. Despite the loss and suffering, Jamila and her allies made significant changes. The global community began to move toward greater transparency and justice. The story of Jamila and Lisa, despite all the tragic events, became a symbol of strength, resilience, and hope. Their struggle led to real change and restored faith in the possibility of changing the world for the better. Jamila, courageously continuing her work, became an example of how even after the most difficult trials you can find a way to light and change. In the wake of her tragic losses, Jamila continued her fight with renewed determination. She had a new goal: to finish the job Lisa had left unfinished and bring justice to all the victims and suffering they had endured. Despite her fatigue and injuries, Jamila found support in a new circle of allies who helped her analyze the remaining data and continue her investigation. Her new partners, who were highly trained professionals and lawyers, brought a unique approach to the work. Together, they began to sift through the information they had gathered earlier and discovered that some key figures in the conspiracy were connected to covert international operations. This discovery led them to a new level of investigation, where they were able to build a clearer picture of the global network of corruption. During her work, Jamila faced another shock. One of her old allies, who had previously seemed reliable, turned out to be a traitor. He was involved in the machinations and secretly worked for one of the groups they were trying to expose. This betrayal was a blow to her trust and moral fortitude, but Jamila did not allow it to break her resolve. She understood that her fight was more than just personal revenge, it was a fight for justice and truth. Meanwhile, international attention to their case began to grow. New revelations attracted the attention of world leaders and human rights organizations. Jamila and her team continued to uncover details of the global conspiracy, leading to the creation of independent commissions and international investigations. These commissions began to act, examining and exposing corruption at various levels of government. During the investigation, Jamila discovered that the conspiracy they were involved in had even deeper roots. One of the key figures was an influential corporation that used its connections to manipulate economic systems and politics in different countries. This corporation was connected to various government structures and had access to high-profile officials. The work on the case led to new revelations. It turned out that some of the previously exposed individuals and groups had secret agreements that allowed them to manipulate financial markets and political decisions on a global scale. These revelations became a sensation, and Jamila felt that her efforts were beginning to bear fruit. The new revelations led to a huge public outcry. Many people took to the streets demanding reform and accountability from governments and corporations. Large-scale demonstrations around the world increased pressure on governments and became a catalyst for change. The movement attracted media attention and became the basis for a new round of global reforms. At the same time, Jamila and her team faced new challenges. Anonymous threats and attacks on their lives continued, but they also found support in international human rights organizations, which provided them with resources and protection. These organizations helped them create safe channels for information and ensure their safety. Finally, their work culminated in the trial of key figures in the conspiracy. International courts began to hear cases against high-profile corrupt officials, and Jamila found herself at the center of these trials as a key witness. Events moved quickly, the courts handed down sentences, and many of the accused were found guilty and received harsh sentences. The justice process, though long and difficult, has become a symbol that justice can be achieved despite all odds. Jamila and her allies have been recognized for their tireless efforts, and their work has led to significant changes in the global system. After her ordeal, Jamila found some peace. She continued to work to strengthen justice systems and fight corruption, but her life was now calmer. She was able to reconnect with her remaining loved ones, and their support helped her regain a sense of normalcy. Jamila's story became a lesson in the strength of the human spirit and the importance of fighting for the truth. Despite all the tragedies and trials, her determination and resilience led to real change. Jamila finally found solace in the fact that her efforts and sacrifices were not in vain, and that her work helped create a more just and transparent world. The story of Jamila and Lisa has come to its tragic end, leaving behind a trail of deep suffering and sacrifice. After the many trials they have endured and the sacrifices they have made in their fight for the truth, their struggle has culminated in a final tragic act. Jamila, in the hospital after another attack, was gradually recovering. Her physical condition was improving, but the emotional wounds remained open. Threats still sounded in her life, and each new piece of news brought fear and anxiety. After a long period of recovery and despite constant tension, Jamila decided to finish what she had started. One day, she received information that the remaining figures of the conspiracy were planning another major attack that could destroy everything they had fought for. Jamila, full of determination, gathered her team and prepared a final action to prevent this. They began preparing for the final operation to expose the conspiracy and stop the planned attack. However, a betrayal they could not have predicted occurred. One of their closest allies turned out to be a spy working for the enemy. This betrayal proved fatal to their plan. Information about the upcoming operation leaked out, and the villains behind the conspiracy were ready for the upcoming strike. When Jamila and her team arrived to stop the attack, they found that their opponents were already there, preparing to act. Everything they had done turned out to be a trap. Their plan to prevent a disaster turned into a tragedy. Forces acting under orders from the conspirators arrived on the scene, and a vicious firefight ensued. Jamila, despite her condition and wounds, participated in the battle, trying to protect her people and prevent the inevitable tragedy. However, the situation got out of control. During the battle, one of her best friends and colleagues was fatally wounded. Jamila, trying to save him, was also seriously wounded. The operation to prevent the attack ended in failure, and the conspirators remained an unanswered threat. The consequences were horrific. The attack destroyed critical infrastructure, causing a large number of civilian casualties. The tragedy shocked the world and brought attention to global corruption, but the cost was terrible. Jamila was hospitalized in critical condition. In her final days, she was surrounded by the remnants of her team and loved ones. Her health continued to deteriorate and she suffered excruciating pain, knowing that her fight had not brought final victory. On the last night before her death, Jamila spent time discussing her final thoughts and hopes with loved ones and remaining allies. She expressed regret that she was unable to complete the work she had begun as she had planned, but found solace in the fact that her efforts had led to important changes and discussions about global corruption. Jamila passed away leaving behind a legacy of fighting for truth and justice, but with a deep sense of grief for all the sacrifices and losses. Her death was a tragic reminder of how high the price can be for pursuing justice and truth. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below. Your opinion and feedback is very important to us. What moments stood out to you? Do you have any suggestions for future stories? We would be glad to hear your opinion.